A guest would have arrived at the tree-lined entranceway and be greeted by the Martin family. Rock Hall was originally a farm of 600 acres, with many outbuildings and barns, a slave quarters, a carriage house, and a smokehouse, a dairy, and an ice house. When the house was built, it had a clear view of the ocean just a mile away. Rock Hall has wide hallways and high ceilings, and each room has a fireplace for warmth. This Georgian colonial home was built by Josiah Martin in the year 1767, when he was already an elderly man. Josiah Martin came here by ship from the island of Antigua in the British West Indies, where he was born, and where his father owned a sugar plantation called Green Castle. Sugar cane was in great demand, and the West Indies produced 80 to 90% of the sugar consumed in Western Europe. Growing sugar cane was profitable and in great demand, but labor-intensive. This demand was met by creating slave labor. In Antigua, great hostility was prevalent at the Martin plantation Green Castle. During the early hours of Christmas morning in 1701, when Josiah was a young boy, his father was murdered by his slaves. Accounts of the bloody rebellion reported that his father refused his slaves the usual Christmas holiday. This event and other hardships in Antigua that included hurricanes, frequent droughts, and contagious diseases had an effect on Josiah's future lifestyle. These factors did not deter Josiah from independently purchasing land and cultivating sugarcane on a profitable sugar plantation. As Martin became prosperous, he began to dream of an absentee planter's life. He would eventually leave a manager to bear the burden of sugar production in Antigua. Josiah's original longed-for place changed from England to the British colony of New York, where his sugar and molasses were sold. It was at this time that he became impressed by the Long Island shores. They were close to New York, satisfied his preference for a rural environment, and provided relative safety from contagious diseases like smallpox. During the war, the Martin family supported the king despite what others in the surrounding area felt. They were considered loyalists. Rock Hall was Josiah's greatest accomplishment and represented the successful completion of his life's goal. He had become a prosperous gentleman, able to erect a fine country estate for his family and his grandchildren. Some of his children and their children lived with him. Rock Hall was a fashionable, formal home for his family, but it was also a place where you could hear children playing and laughing. Josiah's pride and joy was his granddaughter, Mary Elizabeth. When she was 9 years old, Josiah learned of a Boston artist, John Singleton Copley, who was painting portraits of wealthy Loyalist families in New York. Josiah and his wife, Mary, commissioned Copley to paint their first grandchild before she left Rock Hall. Mary and her family were moving to North Carolina, where her father was named royal governor. Josiah thought that this painting would be a remembrance of Mary Elizabeth, who was about to move away from her beloved Rock Hall. This painting was to be framed over the mantel in what was considered the best parlor in the house. Josiah was very proud of his son, Dr. Samuel Martin. Samuel was an intelligent and friendly doctor who took care of the countryside. He gave medicine to people, practiced bloodletting, dressed wounds, tended to fractures, and performed minor surgeries. After a few short years, discontent in North Carolina fanned into rebellion, and Mary Elizabeth's mother and siblings were forced to flee back to the safety of Rock Hall. Mary's father fled to a British ship, where he stayed through August 1776. Shortly after the family returned from North Carolina, this safety was interrupted because American rebels occupied the house. They ransacked the house and arrested Dr. Samuel Martin. Josiah and his wife Mary were treated as servants in their own home. Mary Elizabeth's father wrote that the family suffered the mortification of being obliged to entertain all of the ragamuffins, who thought fit to quarter themselves at their house. During the occupation, Dr. Martin was forced to stand trial in New York because he was charged with being loyal to the king. During the occupation, only women and children and the elderly Josiah Martin lived in Rock Hall. Dr. Martin was eventually released from prison after posting bond and promising to behave peaceably. After the brief occupation, the English regained control of the South Shore of Long Island, and life at Rock Hall returned to normal through the end of the war. An inventory list shows that the Martins owned hogs, pigs, turkey, fowl, and geese, and the barn housed bulls, cows, sheep, and lambs. They also had a carriage house, which held wagons and carriages. Slaves did assist in running Rock Hall until slavery was soon outlawed in New York State in 1827. Rock Hall is a home that has survived the test of time. It is a house whose stories tell us the history of both Long Island and our country.